Hey guys, welcome to Unit 9, Developmental Psychology. We are almost done. If you take a look at your textbook, we don't have too many units left here. Let's see what we've got. And after this, we're going to start doing our review. Be in total full swing on that one. Of course, my teacher copy has like 500 more pages than it needs, but Unit 9, we have Unit 14 to go. So we have about 5 units after this one, so 6 left. Let's get started. We'll get through this quickly. It's going to be a lot of videos on this. We're going to break it down into stages. So the first stage is going to be prenatal development, babies. The second one will be adolescence and teen. The third one will be adult. And then the fourth one, we're going to be like concepts in development that we'll discuss. So our essential question is, how do people develop physically, cognitively, socially, morally throughout the entire lifespan? So we'll be asking that question as we go along. We should be able to define that more concretely. All right, infancy and childhood. So prenatal development and the newborn. Obviously, you guys have had a health class, so you know how this works. But the sperm and egg fuse together, and the cells begin to split rapidly, and that is called a zygote. Over time, the zygote becomes an embryo where the organs begin to be formed. The X and Y chromosomes determine the sex of the child. So 2 X's is female, X and a Y is a male. Then the unborn child becomes a fetus, which it will remain until birth. They can start to hear outside voices about the second trimester. So not too far into it. We're going to be watching some videos in class that really show this entire thing. It's amazing medical technology that we have today. Alright, so prenatal development and the newborn, some things to look out for, mainly fetal alcohol syndrome. Your book talks about some other things. So your fetus can be exposed rather easily to teratogens, outside chemicals or viruses. We've talked about what a teratogen is before when we talked more in depth about drugs. And those are the ones that transcend the blood-brain barrier and also transcend the uterine line as well and get in there to the baby. So alcohol is really good at this. So are some other drugs, right? A lot of things that we've talked about before. Now, what is distinctive about fetal alcohol syndrome is that this occurs if the fetus is exposed to heavy alcohol consumption. And we're going to see both cognitive and physical developmental deficiencies in the child. So what are some key characteristics here? Thin upper lips. But if somebody has a thin upper lip, it does not indicate that they've suffered from fetal alcohol syndrome. It's just there's more of a tendency toward it if fetal alcohol syndrome is present. Minor ear abnormalities. The ear might be misshapen in some way. It might also not be able to hear as effectively. Low nasal bridge. It kind of means this part on your nose that juts out here is not going to be as deep. It'll be quite shallow. Short palpebral fissures. This just means under the eyeball you're going to be seeing some more lines and crinkles there. Flat mid-face and short nose, of a very short nose. And also this little ridge right above your lip, you won't see that. That won't be as distinct. So those are some physical signs to look out for with fetal alcohol syndrome. Alright, the brain is mostly formed during birth. Your brain does grow over time after you're born. But most of the formation occurs at birth. So the frontal lobe develops the most after birth, but the rest of the brain develops in the womb. Maturation. This is a biological growth process that enables orderly changes in behavior. What are orderly changes in relatively uninfluenced by behavior? Okay, that doesn't say what it needs to say. But basically, maturation is a process by which the physical body changes and then therefore causes changes in behavior. So there's no sort of environmental stimulation going on here. It's just physical changes change behavior. So we see this a lot in babies, right? The more that they develop and the more that the brain develops, we see distinct changes in their ability to move and their ability to respond to human reaction and emotion. And this is also shown by walking, right? They're not able to walk in the first few months of life, but most infants walk by 15 months, and that's due to maturation, so maturing. Guys, I've asked you before if you can remember anything before the age of 2 or 3, and most of us say no, we don't remember a single thing. And if we remember anything, it's most likely been, it's a false memory implanted by our parents telling us of how we were like before the age of 5. This is due to infantile amnesia. It's because the hippocampuses and the frontal lobes are not fully developed before birth, and so we don't really remember much until the age of 5. Alright, cognitive development in babies. So this is really interesting. As babies grow, they start to develop the schemas. Remember, we talked about schemas when we talked about language, and these are just categories, right, that we sort of log information into. So as the older we get, the more schemas we build. And through two processes, there's this assimilation, interpreting new info into already existing schemas, and then accommodation, adapting your old schemas to incorporate new info. So new technology, new awareness, new definition of man, right? Man used to be mammal that used tools, and now it can't be because we found out that monkeys use tools. Thanks, Jane Goodall. So we had to redefine man. So we had to adapt the old schema to incorporate the new info, or Pluto is no longer a planet. All right, Jean Piaget, he is one of your key people for this unit, and he developed the stages of cognitive development. This is incredibly famous, popular. You're going to see this in every single psychology class you ever take. And here's what they are. So birth to nearly 2 years, sensory motor, 2 to about 6 or 7 years, pre-operational stage, about 7 to 11 years, concrete operational, and 12 through adulthood, formal operational. We're going to be talking more about this in class. Lev Vygotsky, another important key person that you've got. He believed that language was important for social mentoring and the building blocks for thinking. So he sort of studied kids, and what he found was that by the age of 7, children are capable of thinking in words. So instead of dog seeing a picture, they actually can think in the word dog, and of using those words to work out solutions or problems. So this is when our mathematical skill really peaks, right? If you immediately thought of X's and Y's in algebra, yes, children at the age of 7, if taught correctly, can start learning algebra. So they internalize their culture's language, and they rely on inner speech, which is talking to yourself. So they talk to themselves a lot, kind of like you and I do now, but now we're more in the coaching phase. Kids at age 7 are more in the talking out problems, having to say every word to think it out. So an example I have for you is the no-no cake. So every time you tried to grab for a piece of cake and it wasn't your turn, or it wasn't an appropriate time for cake, mom went, no, no. And so later, to control your own behavior and prevent you from eating that cake when mom's no longer watching, what you have to say to yourself is no, no. And as soon as you do, you don't eat the cake. So this is also an example of classical conditioning, right? Yes, it is. So, all right, social development, stranger anxiety. So the fear of strangers that infants commonly display, and they all do, this begins by about 8 months of age, and it can last a long time if not nurtured properly. This can actually affect children well into adulthood. So we have to work on stranger anxiety. You want a healthy level anxiety where they acknowledge stranger danger. We also don't want it to be at an unhealthy level where every stranger is untrustworthy. Attachment. This is really big. You're going to see this with another key person, Ainsworth, who develops concepts of attachment. This is an emotional tie with another person, shown in young children by seeking closeness to the caregiver and showing distress on separation. Harry Harlow's monkeys. And there you go, sure enough, our example. So, infants bond with surrogate mothers because of bodily contact, not nourishment. And that's something that we see with his monkeys. There's an optimal period shortly after you're born when an organism's exposure to certain stimuli or experiences produces proper development. For example, newborns' exposure to breastfeeding allows for that attachment to mature. All right, there's secure attachment and insecure attachment. Basically, the difference is that secure attachment creates a sense that the world is predictable and trustworthy, whereas insecure attachment does not. Secure attachment is caused by careful sensitivity and responsiveness when the infant is very young, and they grow up with a sense of basic trust. Insecure attachment is caused by apathetic parenting and tends to have a worse sense of trust and avoid attachment. Watch Good Will Hunting. That'll help you out with this one. Alright, so 60% of infants display secure attachment when placed in unfamiliar environments. Infants happily explore their environment in the presence of their mother. When the mother leaves, signs of distress are evident in infants, and this is a secure attachment thing. And 30% of infants show insecure attachment when placed in the same settings. And what happens here is that the infant clings to their mother or their caregiver, and they're less likely to explore the environment. And as the caregiver leaves the room, the complete, utter, total, chaotic meltdown. All right, attachment deprivation. When deprived from attachment, children tend to grow into more aggressive and abusive adults. So we really need to foster a nurturing, loving environment. Similarly, when taken from a loved one, children have difficult times eating, sleeping, getting along with others. We see a lot of those social conditions present when mom and dad both have to work. They work odd shifts. too exhausted to help parent, that sort of thing. All right, imprinting. This is a really interesting phenomenon, and it actually does not happen in humans, sadly enough. This is the process by which certain animals form attachments during a critical period very early in life. So Conrad Lorenz, another key dude, that's him right there, snazzy beard, right? He discovers imprinting. What he did basically was he basically took a bunch of hatchlings, and before they hatched, he would observe, and as soon as they hatched, he wanted to be the first thing that they saw. So what happened after they had seen him? Well, they followed him around everywhere, trying to mimic his motions and his walk and his movements. So this is a very special type of learning. It's really about mimicking and mirroring and following the one you're attached to. Things that, animals imprint on all sorts of things. They've had animals imprint on a box with wheels. And imprinting is a very delicate process. If you do not imprint on the right thing, it's very difficult to reverse, right? So if a duck imprints on a box with wheels, how is he to understand his environment and survive and eventually be able to go out in the world by himself? Probably not going to happen. So imprinting is hugely important for the survival of the species. Self-concept. All our thoughts and feelings about ourselves in answer to the question of who am I? It's existentialism, right? This concept of do we exist, and if so, what am I? So, the stages of self-concept. Infancy, you develop attachment. Young children develop a positive sense of self. And the end of childhood, around 12 years old, is the awareness of self-concept. So, children understand at this age of 12 that their views of themselves affect how they behave. And parents can encourage a positive and realistic self-concept through the works of Stanley Hall, and we'll get into him more in class. Parenting styles, we're also going to talk about these more in class, but there's authoritarian, permissive, authoritative. So take a look at all of those on this page. One of these is best. See if you can find out. Alright, that is going to do it for our first video cast today, guys. And we will